Our next section in the architecture document is the architecture overview. This section is usually a long one and can reach to up to 10 pages. Its audience is the development team and the QA lead. The architecture overview section provides a high-level view of the system's architecture. Its goal is to present the architecture to the team and to explain its structure and logic. This section does not deep dive into the specifics of any component of the architecture. This is saved for the next section, but it lays the foundation of the architecture and provides the context in which the various components will work. This section has usually three parts. The first part of this section gives a general description of the designed architecture. This part lays the foundation of the architecture by describing its type and the reasoning behind it and the major non-functional requirements. For example, this part will explain that the system will be, for example, a web-based system and will outline the reasons for this choice. It will describe the major architectural pattern used, such as microservices, REST API, stateless, and so on. In addition, it can be stated in this part that this application must have an average performance of 50 requests per second. It should be clear that this part lays the foundation for the rest of the architecture that will be built on top of it. The second part is a high-level diagram of the architecture. This diagram describes the general concepts of the architecture using the various services, data stores, and interactions, so that the reader will comprehend what the various components of the architecture are and what is the responsibility of each one. As mentioned before, there is not a single formal standard for visualizing architecture concepts, and I'm using PowerPoint for that. Let's look at a typical architecture diagram taken almost as is from one of the recent architecture documents I've been working on. As you can see, this diagram contains three types of elements: services, depicted as black rectangulars, interactions, displayed as arrows, and data stores, represented as cylinders. The diagram shows the various parts of the architecture. It displays the services that together assemble the system, the role of each one, where they place their data, and the interactions between them. Don't worry if you are not familiar with every term in this diagram. For example, we did not discuss the MQTT protocol. This is a specialized protocol used extensively by IoT devices, but is less common in more traditional applications. When the team will see this diagram, the developers will understand what are the components involved in the system and why they are there. This will be extremely helpful later when we will deep dive into each component, and the developers will already be familiar with the component and its role in the grand scheme. It's important to note that the diagram is a logic one. There is no mentioning of servers, network switches, network drives, load balancer, and the such. This is a strictly logic diagram displaying the logic components of the architecture. Do not mix physical hardware with logic architecture. The third and last part of the overview section is the walkthrough of the diagram. In this part, you will describe the various parts of the diagram and their role verbally. This part walks through the diagram and explains each and every component in it. It describes in simple words what is the exact role of the component, what is its functionality, and what interactions it has with each and every other component. In addition, it describes the data that is stored in the component's data store if there is one. This part is extremely important, since a diagram cannot convey all the intricacies of the architecture. It's important to include any logic details that you think will be relevant, such as the component's users, expected load, future extensions, and more. You will see a complete example of this part in the architecture document you will get on the next section of this course. Now, let's talk about technology stack. What is the exact section in the document where the technology stack should be described? Is it here in the overview section or in the next section that deep dives into the various components? Well, the answer, as you might expect, is it depends. If the system has a single technology stack and all its components will be built using this stack, then the overview section is a great place to write about it. On the other hand, if the stack is different between the various components, it should be described per component. Since in modern systems there are usually more than one technology stack used, I'll describe this part in detail in the next section. So, let's drill down.